ambition, but it didn't work. We were unable to defeat Iran using air power and sea power, so after a few days we were ready to quit. And conceivably, we could have exited the conflict with a peace agreement in very short order by negotiating with the more moderate elements of Iran's government. But this is why it's important to understand those fundamental differences. If the United States made peace with Iran, if we sort of shrugged our shoulders and said, well, we failed in our regime change war, and we're not willing to dedicate a ground force to invade Iran, oh well, I guess we'll just make peace. You realize this is totally unacceptable to Israel. And so they actually had to intervene, not only against Iran, but against our interests, and prevent us from having peace by telling Iran's negotiators. And another negotiator stepped up. These are the people that betrayed what eventually became the ceasefire in April, and then the MOU, which was announced a couple weeks ago. Israel's going to kill those people too. Now understand where this is going. As it stands right now, as you know, the U.S. is unable to achieve regime change. We failed. We lost. The Iranian regime is intact, arguably stronger than it was before. It's more entrenched, it's more resilient. They're hardened after the attack. That's what's not going to happen. The only way for us at this point now to achieve regime change is with a ground invasion. That's it. You've got two options. Either the U.S. gives up and surrenders, or we have to literally invade the country. We have to literally send maybe 1 million U.S. soldiers, maybe 500,000 U.S. soldiers to invade Iran. This is a country that's mountainous. This is a country with deserts. They've got a million-man army themselves, huge arsenal of drones and missiles. We would have to invade this country with 500,000 to 1 million soldiers to topple their government. And surely if this happens, you're talking about maybe hundreds of thousands of dead Americans. Certainly in the tens of thousands, potentially in the hundreds of thousands, trillions of dollars in expenditure. If we don't have peace with Iran, this is the alternative. If we don't have a peace deal with Iran on some terms that they are comfortable with, then that's the only other alternative. The U.S. ground war, 500,000 dead Americans, 4 million dead Americans, trillions of dollars lost, huge hit to the global energy market. And this is what Israel is actively trying to create by killing negotiators. They're actively trying to thwart a deal. And they've done it in every way that they can. They killed the first round of negotiators. We thwarted their attempt to kill the second slate of negotiators. We made an MOU, we made our deal with Iran. Israel is doing everything they can right now to prevent this deal from being implemented by going to war in Lebanon. We announced the MOU with Iran. Israel says the next day, we won't abide by it. We weren't a party to it. We don't agree. We vetoed the deal. And so it literally cannot be overstated how evil these people are. You may think that people like Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin, you might think that their great sin is that they care a little bit too much about Israel. Well, some people might say they basically agree with our coalition. They support Trump. They're generally right-wing. They just care a little bit too much about Israel. I don't think we even fathom the level of treachery that people like that have with our country. All of them, for that matter. These people like Sean Wire, these people like Alex Carr, Bill Ackman, all of them. Because if you really press them and say, okay, well, what is the alternative? When they insist that Israel should operate in Lebanon, when they insist that we should make a deal with Iran, when they insist that Israel has a right to defend itself, you have to ask these people, where do you think that's going to lead? Because if Israel responds to every attack, every perceived real or fake attack, every real or fake thing that they provoke or not, if Israel continues in Lebanon, if there is no deal with Iran, where does that necessarily lead? It necessarily leads to a quarter of a million Americans and probably $3 trillion war, at least in crashing the global economy. And so when these Jewish American commentators like Shapiro or Levin, or a billionaire like Bill Ackman, or a billionaire like Joel Lansdale, when these people say Israel should do whatever it wants, we should never make a deal with Iran, they have a right to defend themselves, and so on and so forth, understand where that necessarily is pointing towards. It's pointing towards death and destruction for Americans on a scale that we haven't seen since World War II. And they know that. They're smart. God reminds us how smart they are. They know that, and they're okay with that. They're perfectly willing to allow Americans to sacrifice their lives and their country and the whole thing so that Israel can terraform the region again so that they can simply expand on their front. That's ultimately what it's about. You push any one of these Jewish American pro-Israel activists, you say, okay, so what's the plan? If you're against the deal with Iran, if you're in favor of Israel sabotaging these efforts, with their ceaseless attacks in Beirut and southern Lebanon, with their assassination of Iranian officials, with their provocative rhetoric, where do you think that goes next? And they know the answer, if you're okay with that. Are the rest of us? Do you think literally any other group of Americans would take that trade? Sending Americans to die ultimately to defeat Iran, and for what purpose? It's so that Israel can expand into West Bank, Gaza, Lebanon, and so it can project its influence everywhere else in the Middle East. And so that Israel becomes a new superpower. They become a new hub in the Eurasian African continent. That's the plan. So that's what we're from the Not really a big surprise. Not anything we haven't already seen. This has been the story since the beginning. This is detail often told. Like this from the very start. And you might remember that actually the Middle East was coming together in peace before October 7th. Saudi Arabia and Iran were making peace. Potentially Saudi Arabia and Israel were going to make a deal. Everything was going in the right direction until this false flag on October 7th. And there were many times during the conflict when there were Herculean efforts by Biden and the Trump administration to bring them to fighting every single time it's the same story. Israel killing negotiators from Palestine. Israel attacking Iranian consulate in Syria. Israel launching an attack on the Palestinian negotiators in Qatar. Israel sabotaging a ceasefire with Hamas, with Hezbollah, with Iran. It's been the story since the very beginning, so this doesn't apply to anybody. What is this? Who planted the story in the New York Times? Because I have a sneaking suspicion that there are probably elements from within the government, probably from within the Republican Party, that realize that if the war goes on any longer, then there goes the Republican chances of winning in 2028. And I think there's some recognition in the United States that our interests have completely diverged with Israel. And if the U.S. goes down in war, it's also the Republican administration in particular that goes down with it. We're going to have to blame for it. And so I think that's why maybe there are military people, there might be Republican Party people, intelligence people. I think there is a trickle of information now coming out in the press being planted there. Maybe to turn the tide of public opinion or to signal even to Israel that they are on notice. Because this is not the first story like this. There was a story from, I don't know, last night or 2 nights ago, blowing the whistle on how Israel had a plan to arm the Kurds to cross over from Iraq into Iran to try to incite a revolution. And there were a couple stories from a few weeks ago about how the U.S. war in Iran was totally effective at destroying Iran's missiles and drones. And you go back to February when they said at the very beginning that the U.S. right would not knock over Iran government into Iran. So maybe that's a source of optimism there. People in the administration seem to realize it's not going the way we need to. And hopefully the politicals, they're heading to roll first because then that gives them incentive to shut it down. But anyway, that's the story, guys. We're running out of time. I'm not going to reflect people's story. I just don't care that much about it. We're going to take a look at our super chats, what you guys are saying about it. And yeah, we'll take a look. I'm probably not going to do a show tomorrow because it's 4th of July. But we'll be back on Monday. And it's just like, there's nothing going on. It's popping off lately. Tonight we got to talk about reflecting cool and like BS story about Israel. So I think I'm going to skip tomorrow. So come back on Monday. But, all right, let's take a look. We're going to get into the super chats. We'll see what you guys have to say. Let's see. Where's our super chat? Think so? I hope so. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, man. Yeah, I'm constantly okay tonight. Looking a little bit better. Okay. I'm growing into it a little bit. Yeah, but I don't know what I'm going to do for my next one, but can't keep doing the same things. It's pretty rough for a couple weeks. But anyway, I appreciate it. Thanks. I hope I get to go on yacht. If they get a yacht, bro, let me on yacht. Then again, I don't know if that's a good idea. You gotta be on the same boat, maybe it's a good deal. You know, I do worry about that. So like, get on a helicopter or something. We'd all be like, Israel's number one enemies on a yacht again. Just can't bring in the Mediterranean. Bring it stateside, go on. Nothing. Dries bone. I'm not on Instagram. I've been permanently cucked by Zuckerberg because I'm not on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. And I get nothing in my DMs. Nothing in my DMs. You think? But no. But no, that's why I'm still certifying stuff, because I get nothing in my DMs. I'm not on Instagram. How bullshit is that? You know, when I talk about censorship, people think it's a problem because I can't post clips from my show. You know what the real problem is? If you're not on Instagram, you might as well be fucking dead socially. How am I gonna meet anybody? You can't meet anybody if you're not on Instagram. It's impossible. It's an impossibility. Where are you supposed to be discovered by young people? You can't. So that's like, it's just unconscionable to do that to me. To be banned from Instagram is like being banned from like socializing. It's like being banned, supposed to be banned from real life. So yeah, no, the DMs are pretty abysmal. Okay, I don't even know what that is. Okay. Hey, thanks for the big super chat. Appreciate it. I'll just not have those stop sending super chats in the amount of $666. Okay. The 111 at fine. You know, the 4,400 at fine, but no gesture towards the devil. They're all doing that right now. That's what they're all doing right now. And yeah. Thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Thank you for the massive support. 07 in the chat. Yo. Let's go. Thanks for the massive support, man. We love you. Always good to hear from North Miami. I hope you and all the pets are doing okay. We miss them. We miss the little guys. I don't want to dox the dogs. But we miss them. Good to hear from you. Thank you for the massive support. Hope you're having a great 4th of July. And enjoy the weather. That's going to be fun. Have a good weekend. I don't want to say that. I shouldn't say this like anymore. You know? Hey, thanks for the super chat. No message Marine. Well, that's not, you know, it doesn't really count when you say that. That's good. That's good. Yeah, born again virgin, huh? Yeah, story often told. Yo, born again virgin. She found her virginity again. Isn't that? Hey, Benefit, stay here. Thanks for the super chat. Thank you very much. And the Boy Best for showing up. Boy Best for showing up on 4th of July. God bless. Thank you so much for the huge support. We love you. Yo, thanks for the super chat. Happy birthday. 22, huh? Hope it's a good one. It goes by fast, okay? You have a birthday every night now. Happy birthday, buddy. Enjoy. Both you guys without me, I don't know, man. I think I would quit a long time ago if anybody else had even some semblance of an idea of what to do about any of this, but it's literally just me. I wish somebody else would do it. I wish there was even one other name, but there just isn't. I'm looking at other options. You got Pop Rose, like I said. You got Dan Jerry, who's an idiot. You got Ian Carroll, who's an idiot. Sneako's a joke. I mean, who else is even there other than this movement in the show? There's nobody else, sadly. Megan Kelly, I mean, when she feels like he wants to be based today. Did he say that? They said that, like, black people. I saw some clip where they said, black people are actually better. It's like, really? Like, what's the whole argument that Jews say they were stupid and that's why they call us William? And now we've gone so far in the other direction, we're saying, okay, William are stupid, that's a good thing, stupid, good thing. It's like, wow, talk about a level of mind rape. Thank you for the big super chat. Yeah, Fish Back really won the debate. Very epic. He did an excellent job. And literally, Colin, I've never seen anything like that before. Hey, thanks for the big super chat. Appreciate it. No message, beautiful. Love it. Really? I'm not surprised. Oh, I easily all day. No, I haven't. Is Will Sexton a Muslim apologist since when? If he is, he better stop. Come on, Will. Come on, Will. That's brilliant, right? Or is that something else? No, I haven't read that. He's just like not even a real person. He has no relationship with the truth. He's a complete reference artist. Not even a because race is an essential characteristic of what a person is. If America was all non-white people, would it be the same country? No. America is barely the same country with different tastes of white people. America was one way when it was all English people. It was another way when it was mostly German people. And now something completely different when a lot of Italians and Irish and Russians, and if it was all non-white people, it wouldn't even be recognizable.
Yo. Hello? 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 Selam. Hello? 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 Yo. Salam. Shanek.
I always hated this idea that some people better than others, and I understand it, but it's a dangerous idea. This is why I like the story of Cain and Abel, I would say. Because Cain is mediocre, but that's because he refuses to do his best. It's not something intrinsic to him, and I actually think that's the right formulation. Because, I had people in my clinical practice who were lost in many dimensions from the perspective of comparison. Someone I remember in particular who, man, she had a lot to contend with. She was not educated, she was not intelligent, she had a brutal family, like terrible history of psychiatric hospitalization. And when I met her at a hospital, she was an outpatient from the psychiatric ward, and she'd been in there with people that she thought were worse off than her, and they were. And that was a long way down. That was like Dante's Inferno level down. It was a long-term psychiatric inpatient ward. Some of the people had been there for 30 years. It made One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest look like a romantic comedy. And she had come back to see if she could take some of those people for a walk, and was trying to find out how to get permission to do it. And so, better than other people. Some people are more intelligent, some people are more beautiful, some people are more athletic. Maybe it's possible for everyone at all levels of attainment to strive towards the good. And maybe those talents that are given to people unfairly don't privilege them in relationship to their moral conduct. And I think that's true. There's no evidence, for example, that there's any correlation whatsoever between intelligence and morality. You're not better because you're smart. And what it also implies is if you're smart, you can get a lot better at being worse. I think for myself, I'm just afraid of dismissing people because of my perception of them. Yeah, well, that's why we have that metaphysical presumption that everybody's made in the image of God, right? Despite that immense diversity of apparent ability, there's that underlying metaphysical assumption that, we all vary in our perceived and actual utility in relationship to any proximal goal, but all of that's independent of the question of axiomatic worth. And that preposterous as that notion appears to be, it seems to me that society... So it does need to retain its racial composition to retain its intrinsic character. Otherwise, that's why. Why does it need to be racial rather than based on citizenship? Citizenship means nothing. Ultimately means nothing. Citizenship is a legal proceeding. It's a legal formality. That does not make someone an American. Somebody come here, not speak English, not have any affinity for us, our values, our religion, or our history, or any of that. I think that's citizenship. Through green card, through birthright citizenship, all kinds of different ways. It means nothing. It's only hard. It's like, well, eventually it's the one word that means something basically that ways. So I'm not saying that people can be American. America should remain mostly white, otherwise it's going to be a different place. America's never been a Latin American country. It's a European country. Glad to hear it. Yeah, well, that's right. It's not my birthday. Ugh, you people discuss me. Yeah, treat yourself. Yeah, treat yourself to a birthday. We eat fucking faggot. I treat myself on my birthday, but why would anybody ever put that in this? I mean, what is even the point? But I'm glad to hear you're done with it for the most part. What you're looking at is treat with this embarrassing. You know, I was in the group chat talking about this the other day. To me, it's just like an indicator of low status. It's just like a status signal. Because I associate with like black people. I just associate with black people. If you're in high all the time, what we be all the time, I just think about the most ghetto black people. Why would you want to be like that? It's just stinks, makes you lazy, makes you stupid. I just don't get it. Thanks, appreciate it. Yeah, shut the fuck up. I know, Jimmy, too. He's not your buddy. Yeah, okay, thanks for the help. I love some people I can watch it, like root for and everything. It's like,
I speak for all of Europe when I say the best player is Lamine Yamal, a Muslim. Scores his first World Cup goal at 18.
To celebrations.
Alhamdulillah.
To celebration.
I see people criticize and they compare him to Ousmane Dembele. And They say Dembele's a real Muslim and Lamine Yamal's a PR Muslim. We all have our shortcomings. We all make our mistakes. You know, he's very young. He's a kid, dude. He has, imagine the temptation. Anybody who around policing him, you know, like, and I can relate because they're like, but that's sneak, don't do this, don't do that. Like, you don't know what it's like to have that temptation. I don't know what it's like to have Lamine Yamal. Ball temptation, you know, to a certain degree, but that imagine what his DMs look like. Imagine, you're 18, you're the best player in a continent, you're getting all that. How would you do? How would you do? I think he's doing a great job. I think he's standing up for what's right. I speak for all of Europe when I say the best player is Lamine Yamal, a Muslim. Scores his first World Cup goal at 18.
To celebrations.
I see people criticize and they compare him to Ousmane Dembele, and they say Dembele's a real Muslim and Lamine Yamal's a PR Muslim. We all have our shortcomings. We all make our mistakes. You know, he's very young. He's a kid, dude. He has, imagine the temptation. Anybody who around policing him, you know, like, and I can relate because they're like, but that's sneak, don't do this, don't do that. Like, you don't know what it's like to have that temptation. I don't know what it's like to have Lamine Yamal's temptation, you know, to a certain degree, but that imagine what his DMs look like. Imagine, you're 18, you're the best player in a continent, you're getting all that. How would you do? How would you do? I think he's doing a great job. I think he's standing up for what's right. I speak for all of Europe when I say the best player is Lamine Yamal, a Muslim. Scores his first World Cup goal at 18.
To celebrations.
A peinarme en feria.
Lo más importante.
Extremely beautiful.
Once a man rates age or high in the chat range, preferences for looks do become kind of subjective and up to personal taste. If you do search for the most handsome man on Google, a lot of contenders will pop up, and many of them do deserve a spot, but the internet seems to agree that Alain Delon or Alain Delon Francais, hope I'm pronouncing the name right, is the most handsome man in the world, even above guys from the newer generation like Chico and Jordan Barrett, which I did videos on, and both are considered PSS layers on their own. So is Delon above them? Delon has quite the perfect facial harmony, which I would like to call subtle masculinity that girls find inviting but not overpowering. So we will put him through the majority of the ideal facial ratios test and give my opinion at the end of the video. If you want to support the channel and get your face evaluated by me with personalized look backs and advice, link will be down in the description. If you want to read more about topics like these, you can check out my blog at nearfaceracing.com. Without further ado, let's get this video started. Of course, we will be picking Delon in his prime, and we will start with the side profile. The ramus is long, which is what is desirable to make the jaw from the side profile fuller and bulkier, but it still looks softer because it's not angled sharply. The mandible is straight. The body of the mandible is visible with a tight hyoid skin, all great. Combining the ramus with the body of the mandible, it gives it a bony angle of around 118 degrees, which is what is desirable, but not overpowering or too sharp. The chin is well projected. It overshoots the nasal bridge by a great margin, which is also perfect. Moving over to the mid-face, the maxilla is forwardly grown, which shows a good cranial facial growth. The nasolabial angle is sitting close. The skull shape is also good. He got a warrior skull. Side profile at 75 out of 9. Looking at the frontal profile, let me just straighten this image to be accurate. There we go. First facial weight to height ratio. It absolutely hits the desirable range of 1.9, a very compact face indeed. The lower to full face ratio is 0.16 with the perfect like Oji curve. Eyes not are falling. The nose weight falls within interesting, my opinion for men. Soft view, okay, and it's under
What am I doing, bro?
Here's a stat for you. Half of Western women 30 and under have no child. It's a little more than half now, so we hit more than half. Half of them will never have a child, and 90% of them will regret it. This is a catastrophe. This is a catastrophe if it's true, and the data are pretty clear, I believe. This means we're setting up 1 woman in 4 for isolation. That gets increasingly brutal as you get older. I also think we're setting up that 25% of women to be preyed upon in a manner like nothing we've ever seen when they enter their later years, because they'll have no one to keep an eye out for them, especially during times of vulnerability. This is not going to be good. Here's a stat for you. Half of Western women...
You said Trump didn't put his hand on the Bible when he was sworn into inauguration because, quote, maybe he affirmatively rejects. How much are you asking again? $65. And everything works okay? Yep. I think it's broken. Will you take 30 for it?
China has just unveiled mobile runways that work by connecting multiple trucks together. They call this a truck-mounted electromagnetic aircraft launch system, and currently it's...
Welcome.
I'm also based. Nice to meet you. Peter. Nice to meet you. I'm going to record my postcard for you. Okay? Why do you need the video?
Document purposes. I'm also on the video, sir.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm also on the video.
Do not undo his work. Improve upon it only.
Yeah, but can you put it down over there? That handle is
No.
filthy. Okay then, I will just... Oh, that's dry blood. Oh,
So what were you working on?
oh, that. I call it the sky mover. Just up that mountain waits a treasure trove of rare resources. Once I mine it...
Do not undo his work. Improve upon it only.
Yeah.
I'm also based. Nice to meet you. Peter. What YouTuber do you want to race the most?
What YouTuber I want to race the most? That's YouTuber.
Probably don't want to race the best. Probably guys that he's faster than you.
I am the fastest YouTuber in the world. I shall speed up.
I want to do this watch.
Then I'll ask him.
Alright, I'm taking 3 guesses now. If I get one of them right, so I guess we'll do watch it. That will mean 100,000 likes. Here's 2009, my first year in university. I'm up doing a paper on like a Friday night. I remember writing a paper, getting that done, and hearing my roommates partying outside and pre-getting ready to go. On top of that, my windows open, I'm sitting in my dorm, and I can hear all the people like partying, like raging, all this shit, right? This all went through my mind. Like, what the hell am I doing? You only get to what God wants. I'm missing out. Everyone's having fun except for me. I can tell you guys confidently, roughly almost 20 years later, that I made the best decision ever by not going out there. Here's 2009, my first year.
Kratos speaks first.
I see my son.
There are 26 letters in the alphabet. You want to know the words too? And... You're training. I'm training. What? This is not true. No, not true. I'll take anything. You can do blood test. Yes, you can do blood test. Yes. No, that's a compliment. You're training. I'm training. What? This is not true. There isn't anything more difficult that you do in your entire life than find a partner and establish a family. Like, it's going to be hard. How do you do it optimally? Well, I can tell you my own experience. I've known my wife since she was 8, and we were friends, good friends, and we departed from each other during adolescence. I was a year younger than everyone in my class, and she matured faster than we knew anyways, and so that...
There's a number of overlapping intelligence issues here, and at the core of it, I see it as an intelligence failure. First of all, the fact that the United States didn't have our own intelligence infrastructure to the point where we could see the holes in Israel's assessments and estimates, that's a major problem. It means that we went into Iran basically following Israel's guidance, following Israel's intelligence, following their targeting packages, instead of our own independent intelligence assessment. Whenever you're in a position like that, you're going in essentially blind, and you're going in kind of like the pit bull on the leash for somebody else. And I think that's what we saw happen very shortly after the promises that Israel made didn't really pan out. Now where we are today is stuck in the same situation, where we still don't have an intelligence network. We still don't have independent intelligence telling us what we can assess and what we can estimate, what we can predict inside Iran. And that's why we're still stuck in this quagmire. We have an MOU that doesn't give us any of the outcomes that we strategically promised the American people. And the MOU isn't working. There's no active cessation of attacks. They've just decreased, they've changed, but it's still happening.
Right, and Professor Zhang, you know, the big goal in the end, which was explained after weeks and weeks of getting nowhere with the others. Trump said, right, this is all about stopping the Iranians having a nuclear weapon. And yet they still got all their enriched uranium. I mean, I think the only way that can ever be got by America or Israel is with ground forces. So I think on that alone, that's clear. But the Iranians have also started talking openly now about the need to build a nuclear weapon, to have one. That actually what this has taught them, if people are wedded to the annihilation of all of their regime, then they need a nuclear weapon to defend themselves. And perversely, it could end up creating a situation where the Iranians actually want to develop something that maybe 3 months ago, 4 months ago, they like to saber rattle about, but weren't actually going to do.
Right. So before the war, the Iranians had a religious fatwa banning the making and use of nuclear weapons. So the Iranians were committed not to building a nuclear weapon. With enriched uranium, Ted Polsto, who is an MIT professor, he says that it'll take them exactly 6 weeks to build a nuclear weapon. So the Iranians had the will, they could build a nuclear weapon. So if they were attacked with a nuclear weapon, then they would respond with at least 10 nuclear weapons. That's how much they can make with their enriched uranium. So it's really a quagmire for the United States. Now, I would say that this reporting that Iran wants to build a nuclear weapon is actually false. There is a religious fatwa in place, and it has to be overruled by the new Ayatollah, and that's a very long process. And quite honestly, it really doesn't need a nuclear weapon at this stage.
No, I mean, Andrew, the reality is the Strait of Hormuz is proving just as effective as any nuclear deterrent, isn't it? Because everybody knows that Iran still maintains control of that strait and can turn it on and off whenever they feel like. And I'd be astonished, given the long and unillustrious history of this regime, if they didn't use that to maximum leverage effect. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And what we've seen is that Iran has managed to turn this conflict into the most significant blow against the United States that any country has been able to execute in many decades. Not only does the United States look like it's in the pocket of a much smaller, more kind of unpredictable country, Israel specifically, not only has this separated GCC allies from the United States, the UAE has dropped out of the oil consortium. Not only do we see that the closest Western allies in the world, in Europe, have distanced themselves from the United States. And that's not even counting how America looks at itself through the lens of politics and identity and global leadership. So just simply by surviving, Iran has shown that small can be powerful and that the United States can be overcome, possibly even defeated. Because if the Ayatollah stands, if the Iranian Republic continues to persist in Iran in its current form, if we reach the end of this war, what was it all for? Yep. And it shows that they won. And if that doesn't inspire and encourage and maybe even provoke countries like North Korea, Cuba, continue to encourage countries like Russia, China, other adversaries competing for global dominance, I don't know what will.
Although it's interesting, Professor Zhang, to look at what's happened in Ukraine, for example, where everybody assumed the Russians would just run Ukraine over pretty quickly. I think Russia assumed it would do it very quickly. That hasn't happened. And we are many years into that war. And in fact, you could argue Ukraine now is not just putting up a good fight, but is giving Vladimir Putin quite a bloody nose. It's proving to be very costly in both Russian human life and on the economy there. It's an interesting thing to look at and say, well, you look at what's happened there, and it may fly slightly in the face of what Andrew just said, but maybe if you're China, you look at what's happened in Iran, I think there's an opportunity for you there, maybe with Taiwan, or maybe to strengthen ties with Iran, whatever it may be. And at the core of it all is a kind of battle for energy, right? I mean, energy is going to be powering the new arms race, which is AI, and the winner may well take all.
If you haven't discovered your secret spy superpower, then somebody else might be using theirs against you. CIA teaches us that there are only 3 types of people in the world: those who motivate, those who manipulate, and those who are being controlled by one of the other 2. I created a 3-minute CIA-style quiz to help you unlock your secret psychological advantage, and
Depending on well, people argue that this war was started in order for America to force the world to buy American energy. Because right now, if you look at the global map, the only reliable source of energy now is Western Hemisphere, right? Because Russia is losing this war in Ukraine or is facing a stalemate, depending on which side you're on. But Ukrainians are striking deep into Russian territory and hitting oil refineries, and so it is reducing Russia's capacity to export oil. The Middle East is on fire. Before, Qatar could provide 20% of the world's LNG. Now it's completely offline. So if you're Japan, who do you turn to? You can't turn to Russia, you can't turn to Qatar, you can't turn to the Middle East. So therefore, you're stuck buying energy from America. So you could say that even though America is losing this war in the Middle East, they ultimately will be the big winner because the world is now completely dependent on the Western Hemisphere for resources.
Andrew, what do you think of that?
I think that there's a couple of kind of fundamental, I don't want to call them mistakes, but foundational assessments that we're missing here, right? First of all, comparing what's happening in Iran to what's happening in Ukraine isn't quite a straight analog, because the whole world rushed to Ukraine's aid. They received hundreds of billions of dollars, weapons, intelligence support, satellite imagery support, not only from the United States, but from Great Britain, from France, from Germany, from across Europe. So the whole world was required to prevent Russia's progress in Ukraine. And what you see from Zelensky still to this day is the continued request for more support and more money and more training and more everything to continue to prosecute this, what was framed to us as a fight to protect democracy. That's not what we're seeing in Iran. Iran has largely stood on its own strategy, on its own weapons reserves, on its own capabilities. Now, yes, it has tapped into Russian intelligence, it's tapped into very likely Chinese support also, but it has stood on its own 2 feet since we launched that first attack. Not just the United States, but in joint concert with Israel. The 2 most sophisticated militaries in the world attacked Iran, and it's still there. So that's a little bit different. Now Professor Zhang's assessment that the United States has created this requirement for Western Hemisphere resources, this is right out of American Strategy 101. America was and has been for a long time the world's leading innovator of technology, and that's how it created a premium pricing model that drove the largest economy. The whole focus on conserving and protecting the Western Hemisphere, and their focus on Cuba now, still to this day, emphasizes the same thing. They want to control resources so they can put a premium price and control distribution around the world, and that's the model that countries like like China are trying to emulate so that they can compete in that economic world. Whether or not it's successful with the taking of President Maduro and the unlocking of oil reserves in Venezuela accessible to the United States is yet to be seen, because there is a huge amount of oil reserves in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, Iran, UAE are sitting on large oil reserves, and as long as the Straits of Hormuz are blocked, correct, that oil is strictly not going to go anywhere quickly. But as soon as even Saudi goes outside of the United States and reaches its own agreement with Iran, or many of these countries that are paying the toll, people are finding a way around following American leadership in this, and that's not a good thing for American people.
And just on Professor Zhang's point about it's inevitable that ground forces will have to be committed at some stage, do you agree with that?
I don't agree with that, and there's one major reason why. I believe that Donald Trump moved on Iran, not just because Israel sold him a false bill of goods, but also because he was looking for a very short, quick political victory. Something that could be framed to the American people to show that the Trump White House was the best White House, the strongest White House, the most powerful White House, and that hasn't happened. So not only has the opposite kind of shown, not only do we see major Trump supporters backing away from Trump, Trump voters backing away from Trump, but we also have this question of what's the next 2 years going to look like. And if we do see a change in the Congress during the midterm elections, then it's going to be even more difficult for Donald Trump to execute his wishes in the Middle East. So it's going to become not only politically difficult, but militarily difficult and legislatively difficult to move troops into the Middle East, especially enough to actually execute the change that we're looking for.
Professor Zhang, your response to that?
Yeah, so first of all, you're assuming that if the Democrats take the House in November, they'll be staunchly anti-war. And there's actually no evidence that the Democrats are anti-war. In fact, the Democrats have enabled this administration's war-making. So I think that if the Democrats were to take the House in November, Donald Trump would actually be under more pressure to use law enforcement. Otherwise, he could face impeachment. He would need a distraction. So
what would be, in your eyes, what would be the purpose of committing ground forces? Would it be to effect regime change, or would it be to get the enriched uranium? I mean, what would be the mission?
The mission would be to force Iran to a political settlement. Right now there's an MOU, and there's a sticking point in the MOU, which is Lebanon. The United States has basically given Iran a lot. It's a very favorable deal for Iran. So the United States promises to, lift sanctions, give Iran control over the Strait of Hormuz. So it's a very favorable MOU. But there's a sticking point, which is that Israel must withdraw from Lebanon. And Iran is very insistent on that because Hezbollah is a very close ally of the IRGC. Now, what the Americans believe is that because the terms are so favorable, the Iranians are willing to compromise on this Hezbollah issue. And the IRGC has shown these past few days that they're not willing to compromise. So now the strategy is basically to force a military solution. And you do that by eliminating Iran's proxies in the Middle East, which includes Hezbollah, the Houthis, and the Shia militias in Iraq. And then you dislodge IRGC from the Strait of Hormuz, which is the main negotiating chip of the IRGC. Now, these past few days, we've seen massive movements on all fronts. So Saudi Arabia is rallying tribespeople, arming them to march against the Houthis. There's a crackdown in Baghdad. They call it corruption crackdown. But it's really the Iraqi Prime Minister consolidating power, and it's possible he moves against the Shia militias at some point. The big flashpoint, of course, is Lebanon. So recently, under Marco Rubio, Israel and Lebanon have come to a peace treaty, and this could provoke a civil war between Hezbollah and the Lebanese government. There's talk of ISIS coming in from the north, from Syria, and then Israel is going to extend its southern offensive. So I see this as a coordinated attempt to destroy all of Iran's proxies at once. There have been some multiple aerostrikes against the IRGC positions in the Strait of Hormuz, and people expect that's really softening positions in order to insert ground forces at some point.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, of course, at the core of all this remains Gaza. The Israelis still occupy a large swathe of Gaza. Millions have been displaced, 70, 80,000 people killed. And that is still the irreconcilable element of the whole Middle East thing, which always comes back to Israel-Palestine. But at the same time, you have members of the Israeli government like Ben-Gvir now openly demanding genocide in Lebanon, literally saying all of Lebanon must burn in a statement. And, to all those who've defended Israel against the charge of genocide in Gaza, here you've got their security minister openly, brazenly demanding a genocide in Lebanon. This is, I think, one of the reasons that Israel's popularity as a country around the world has been falling quite rapidly, because you've got these absolute lunatics in the Israeli government who are saying the most unconscionable things.
Yeah, between the United States and Israel, which for a long time have been seen as kind of democratic, stabilized, economically focused, countries that are trying to make the world a better place. For many, many decades, that's the stigma they tried to carry. But here in the last 5 years, what we've seen is that these countries who actually tried to shape their reputation have just completely disregarded what they once stood for: order, democracy, justice, fairness. It's gone. And that normalization among those world leaders is something that's going to play out in waves, in reverberations and echoes for decades to come. The United States has now shown that just being a world leader is no longer something that makes you a non-combatant. And that's what we've seen by the rendering of Maduro, is what we saw by them killing the Ayatollah of Iran. They are going after the heads of state, which means any country can now go after heads of state and treat them essentially as combatants when previously they were not. And what we've seen Israel do in Gaza has opened the door to giving them permission to continue to execute that level of violence, that level of collateral damage across Lebanon. And if Israel can do it, then why wouldn't the enemies of Israel also do it? What is it that would be holding back other countries that are having smaller scale skirmishes? That the world has 160 active conflicts right now. We only pay attention to 4 or 5 of them, but all across Latin America, all across Southeast Asia, all over Europe, there are active conflicts going on, and there's always been an understood kind of rule, gentleman's law of how you actually carry out conflict, and all that's being thrown away. And in the face of that type of unpredictability, it makes the future far less predictable, far less secure, far less safe, not just for us, but for our posterity as well.
Yeah, Professor Zhang, if you talk to the pro-Israeli guests I've had on, and I've had many, they say, look, we've been under constant attack from the Houthis, from Hamas, from Hezbollah, all funded by Iran. This has been going on for decades. And what October the 7th did was it just told the world where this would lead if Israel didn't properly defend itself. In other words, a horrendous terror attack, 3,000 Hamas terrorists pouring over the border and slaughtering anyone they could get their hands on. And it seemed to have a shock reactive component to this, to the Israeli psyche, I think. And early on, I absolutely defended their right to defend themselves. They had a moral duty to their people to do it, especially as Hamas was saying we're going to keep trying to do this. But as it went on, I did start to question proportionality. And my Israeli guests would get very angry about, but they would start citing Dresden, the carpet bombing of Dresden in World War II, or the use of the 2 atomic bombs to end World War II by the Americans against the Japanese and so on. But as I reminded them, well, that's why the Geneva Convention was brought in. But it seems now that Israel doesn't really care about proportionality. They frame everything as, well, we're going after the terrorists, and if a load of civilians get killed in the process, that's on the terrorists, not on us. They don't seem to care about international law. They have no regard whatsoever for the United Nations or the international courts or anything. So they don't seem to care about the public opprobrium that's come their way, and they don't seem to care much about proportionality or any of these things. They think they're in a struggle for their very existence. And Netanyahu's view is just to bomb his way to what he believes is a safer future. I don't think that is going to work, but what is your view?
First of all, if what's happening is completely a response to October 7th, why is Israel, where are there certain members of the Israeli government threatening Turkey and Egypt right now? What did Egypt and Turkey have to do with October 7th? I think something much larger is going on, which is like there are radical elements of the Israeli government who are intent on achieving the Greater Israel Project, which is what they believe that God promised them in the Bible. And this land stretches from the Nile in Egypt all the way to the Euphrates in Iraq. It also includes parts of Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey. It also includes Saudi Arabia. And if you see it from that lens, then a lot of the actions that Israel has been conducting these past 2 years make a lot more sense. Israel is fighting wars on multiple fronts. And it was really about protecting Israel's sovereignty. You would think that they would go out and make friends in the region in order to better protect their people. But instead, Israel has been starting wars all over the place. You also have Israeli soldiers in Argentina right now. You also have Jared Kushner trying to buy up this island, Sazan Island, in the Adriatic, which has caused all these protests in Albania. So you ask yourself, if all Israel is concerned about is protecting its national borders, why is Israel spreading all across the world right now?
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, I look at what's happening just on the West Bank with the aggressive expansion of the settlements in a very violent manner. I look at the language of Ben-Gvir and Smotrich about Lebanon and about Gaza, and people can argue about whether it's a genocide or ethnic cleansing or whatever it is, but what is inarguable, I think, is that the likes of Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who have senior positions in the Israeli government, would love to see all the Palestinians out of Gaza, out of the West Bank, out of southern Lebanon, at the very least. So I do agree with Professor Zhang. I think there is, for some constituents of this Israeli government, there is a far grander plan here, and they see it as an opportunity to try and make it happen.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as the two of you. I think what we're seeing now, not just in Israel, but across the world, is a swing in the political pendulum in the direction of strongman leadership. And strongmen are able to capitalize on opportunities using violence, using economic manipulation, using social repressions. And that's exactly what we're seeing here in the United States. It's also what we're seeing in Israel. It's also what we're seeing in Russia. It's also what we're seeing in China. It's what we're seeing in the countries that are perpetually in the headline. Those countries that are winning and racing against each other are the ones who are essentially abandoning democratic process and embracing this kind of strongman, borderline dictatorship, borderline fascist kind of approach to pushing their policies in the face of everyone and everything. It's especially upsetting in a place like Israel and a place like the United States because we claim to have a separate judicial process. And the strongmen in charge of both the United States and Israel are facing criminal charges in multiple other areas. So you have to wonder whether or not they're just trying to do what's best for their country. Are they just trying to gain economic freedom, just trying to gain military security, just trying to gain national sovereignty? Or are they trying to do those things aggressively in the hopes that it will defer, delay, and distract from their own criminal issues?
With a nuclear weapon, then they would respond with at least 10 nuclear weapons. That's how much they can make with their enriched uranium. So it's really a quagmire for the United States. Now, I would say that this reporting that Iran wants to build a nuclear weapon, it's actually false. There is a religious fatwa in place, and it has to be overruled by the new Ayatollah. And that's a very long process. And quite honestly, the Iranians don't really need a nuclear weapon at this stage.
Summer is almost upon us. If you're not completely satisfied with your beach body, my condolences, that must be hard for you. It's not just because you're watching the World Cup and drinking beer. Once men hit their 30s, it's harder for the body to lose fat, retain muscle, and recover from injuries. The main culprit is testosterone, which drops off as you age. That's why you hear so many guys talking about it, taking it, and why they feel.
Andy's hair has been growing as long as the business is growing. If I had to describe him, I probably would, because that's kind of the thing that defines him now.
Feel comfortable, but also know they had to have hair that met certain regulations. Every day Spy is a company focused on transformation. And the physical transformation, whether it's cutting your hair or bleaching your teeth or losing 10 pounds, physical transformations are so easy to see and so easy to accept and so easy to get excited about. But there's this very real transformation that can happen inside your head, inside your heart, inside how you see the world, inside you controlling more about how the world sees you. I want to invest in the future of my company and my vision, in large part by taking my face and my hair away from the company. So this is a massive risk, but also a massive investment in the long-term future of what I'm trying to build.
So these last several years that Andy has been growing his hair, I've learned a lot about curly hair, and clearly that's not what I have. And so I've learned a lot about the maintenance and how curly hair works. One of the things we learned is about curl families. And so the last several years I have not touched Andy's hair because I'm always worried about messing it up and disturbing the curl families, and it's always very complicated things when you have curly hair. Someone asked me to describe my dad, I would describe him super extroverted, at least in my eyes, not afraid to do almost anything, and loves his family.
I don't remember you with short hair because I was too young. I see dad in a disguise, not a good disguise. Because I've seen Dad. I've only met Dad with his long career.
People misunderstand the value of what you have to offer because of the thing that they choose to focus on. And I want to prevent I'm still getting used to the new feeling, but it feels awesome. I can actually feel the breeze on the back of my neck, and I can see much farther around the side periphery than I have in a long time. It was funny how much my hair would encroach in on my side vision, and I noticed it most whenever I was out traveling. I started to feel a bit uncomfortable by losing field of sight. But I'll tell you what blows my mind the most is that I'm really not bad looking. Like, my face isn't that bad to look at. Oh, there's so much hair. You just look at the hair. But now I'm kind of like, wow. I see why my wife isn't crazy for marrying me. This is me. Like, this is the real, just me. This isn't anything flashy. This isn't anything crazy. This isn't me trying to have a set piece or showpiece. Something that's intended to capture attention. It's really just me. It gives me a chance to feel like I can be visible. It gives me a chance to feel like I can put on a ball cap and sunglasses and not be recognizable anymore. This really does feel much more genuine and real to the way I'd like to be. Because I never intended to be a face lady. I never intended to be a viral YouTube interview person. I never intended to be anything. I just kind of want to be a husband and a dad and a hardworking contributing member of society.
You look exactly like you did in the other pictures, just really I still not the
Andy's hair. I've learned a lot about curly hair. It really does not.
Why did Joe Rogan blacklist you? So women actually, knowingly passing up, booking up my publisher actually reached out to Joe Rogan's show to make sure they were aware of me and my upcoming book, and their producer wrote back and said, Joe knows Andy, Joe's been tracking Andy, and Joe does not want to talk to Andy. Very interesting. I don't know why. I have a silly theory, because when I interviewed with Lex, so I made Lex look bad on his own show. And a lot of the comments that came out after, a lot of the reason that show did so well is because people are commenting on what their opinions are for the ways that I made Lex look bad. Why did Joe Rogan blacklist you? So Rogan actually, knowingly is passing me up. I have a book coming out, my publisher actually reached out to Joe What I'm saying is that through a conversation you develop a baseline, right? Like even just in the first part of our conversation, I've been able to create some baseline elements about you. You've been able to create baseline elements about me.
Extremely well informed.
China.
Things aggressively in the hopes that it will defer, delay, and distract from their own criminal issues. Everyone and everything. It's especially upsetting in a place like Israel, like the United States, because we claim to have a separate judicial process. And the strong men in charge of the United States. And Israel's separate judicial process, and the strong men in charge of both the United States and a separate judicial process.
But it didn't work. And then other negotiators stepped up. These are the people that betrayed what eventually became the ceasefire in April.
Are they just trying to gain to wonder whether or not they're being progress like Israel in a place like the United States because they claim to have a separate judicial process, and the strong men in charge of both the United States and
Okay.
Israel are facing criminal charges in multiple other areas. So you have to wonder whether or not they're just trying to do what's best for their country, or are they just trying to gain economic freedom, just trying to gain military security, just trying to gain to gain national sovereignty, or are they trying to do those?
With a nuclear weapon, then they would respond with at least 10 nuclear weapons. That's how much they can make with their enriched uranium. So it's really a quagmire for the United States. Now, I would say that this report reporting that Iran wants to build a nuclear weapon. It's actually false. There is a religious fatwa in place, and it has to be overruled by the new Ayatollah, and that's a very long process. And quite honestly, there isn't really need a nuclear weapon at this stage.
Summer is almost upon us. If you're not completely satisfied with your beach body, my condolences, that must be hard for you. It's not just because you're watching the World Cup and drinking beer. Once men hit their 30s, it's harder for the body to lose fat, retain muscle, and recover from injury. The main culprit is testosterone, which drops off as you age. That's why you hear so many guys talking about it, taking it, and why they feel.
Andy's hair has been growing as long as the business is growing.
I probably would, because that's kind of the thing that defines you now.
Feel comfortable, but ultimately I had to have hair that met certain regulations. Every day 5, the company focuses on transformation. And the physical transformation, whether it's cutting your hair or bleaching your teeth or losing 10 pounds, physical transformations are so easy to see, so easy to accept, so easy to get excited about. But there's a very real transformation that can happen inside your head, inside your heart, inside how you see the world, inside you controlling more about how the world sees you. I want to invest in the future of my company and my business in large part by taking my face and my hair away from the company. So this is a massive risk, but also a massive investment in the long-term future of what I'm trying to build.
So these last several years, like Andy has been growing his hair, I've learned a lot about curly hair, and clearly that's not what I have. Because I've learned a lot about the maintenance and how curly hair works. One of the things we learned is about curl families. And so the last several years I have not touched Andy's hair because I'm always worried about messing it up and disturbing the curl families, and it's always very complicated when you have curly hair.
Someone else would describe my dad, I would describe him super extroverted, at least in my eyes. Not afraid to do almost anything. And I love his family. I don't remember you with it because I was too young.
Standard Muslims, who by the way hate us.
The comments are.
He's got a crazy text.
Palestine, they don't give a fuck. They do it for attention. People that actually like take time and research and donate about Palestine and actually take there and they actually do.
Yeah, I did. I opened up a charity for Palestine, and I don't see any of these people on the screen.
On the tip. Sure, I've seen a single other creator in this. You need to have eternal guilt for it for the rest of time. So I feel like really.
Mostly male and most. That's you're not a black woman then. Like that's not how this works, right?
You want to talk about housing or healthcare or
right there. Super. That's what I'm saying. All right. Maylot Heroes won by. Always win because Asmongold can engage with the facts more honestly. Hassan is having to fight Asmongold on like 2 or 3 different levels here. I like that Destiny is saying Asmongold will always defeat Ukraine. That world. Oh shit.
Of me, East
soon.
2020. Over institutional. Kind of. It's been the.
I enjoyed this conversation with Ezra, especially a place where
she should have known better.
Right. Democrats then.
Or, yo, how many...
I mean, he dies here, no?
Have completely over.
Só foi jogo sofrido, soubemos ser equipa, ser unidos e marcar gol nesta fase. O que é que lhe sente? O que é que passa na cabeça neste momento?
É especial, é uma competição...
Foi jogo sofrido.
they sell out back then? Were they more expensive back then? I always remember them being around that